What began as a light-hearted exchange during a live talk show took an unexpected turn when Will Smith tried to poke fun at President Ibrahim Traoré. Instead of reacting with anger or humor, Traoré responded with a calm, powerful statement that struck deep and left Will visibly emotional. The moment stunned the audience and has since gone viral as a shining example of dignity, wisdom, and raw truth. The lights were bright, the studio buzzing. The Evening with Celebrities talk show had a star-studded lineup that night. On one couch sat Will Smith, Hollywood's beloved icon. On the other sat President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, in a simple suit, calm and steady. It was supposed to be a light segment. Fun, friendly banter. The host, laughing, nudged Will. "So, Will, ever thought of running for president? You'd be facing this guy." Will chuckled and without malice said, "I'd at least bring some style to the table. No offense, President Traoré, but you look like your tailor gave up halfway." The crowd laughed. Traoré smiled politely. Will wasn't trying to be cruel, it was a joke, the kind you hear often on American late-night shows. But something in the room shifted. Traoré leaned slightly forward, placed his hands together gently, and waited for the laughter to die down. His eyes met Will's, and then, in a voice that was neither angry nor amused, he began to speak. It wasn't what he said that stopped the room, it was how he said it, and what came next would make the entire world pause. "I don't wear power," Traoré began softly. "I carry it." The room quieted. He looked gently toward Will. "In Burkina Faso, there are villages with no electricity, kids who walk miles barefoot to attend class under trees. If I wore a $5,000 suit, I'd be stealing from them." Will's smile faded. Traoré continued, "You make films that make the world laugh, cry, and think. I carry the weight of lives that depend on every decision I make, even the silent ones. If style could fix a broken hospital, I'd dress in gold." The crowd was frozen. No applause, no forced laughter, just stillness. Traoré's words hung in the air, not aggressive, not defensive, but honest, heart-shakingly honest. Will blinked slowly, leaning back. Something had touched him deeply. It wasn't about the joke anymore, it was about the reality behind the man he had tried to poke fun at. And in that brief silence, the cameras caught something rare, tears in Will's eyes. He looked away quickly, but the internet didn't miss it, nor did the millions who would watch the clip on every social media platform within hours. Backstage, after the show, the atmosphere was heavy, not awkward, just quiet. Will sat alone for a moment, sipping water, his mind clearly far away. A producer approached gently. "You okay?" He nodded but didn't speak. The video clip was already online, a 90-second segment titled, "Will Smith Humbled by President Ibrahim Traoré's Words." It had reached 1 million views in less than 2 hours. But it wasn't just going viral, it was changing people. One user commented, "That wasn't just a clapback, that was truth wrapped in grace." Another wrote, "I showed this to my 12-year-old. We both cried." Inside the dressing room, Will finally stood and walked down the hallway to where Traoré was seated, quietly reading a small book. Will took a breath. "Mr. President?" Traoré looked up with a gentle smile. Will's voice cracked. "I needed that. Thank you." The two men, one from Hollywood, the other from the Sahel, shook hands, and in that simple gesture, the world saw something far greater than a viral moment. It saw respect. It saw humility. It saw two men from different worlds meeting on the bridge of truth. By morning, the internet was in a frenzy. The clip of Ibrahim Traoré's calm, truth-filled response had spread across continents. News anchors replayed it. Influencers reacted with tearful eyes. Even major media houses that had rarely covered African leaders were now talking about Traoré. The caption that trended worldwide was simple. "When dignity spoke, the world listened." In Burkina Faso, markets paused. Small radios played the exchange again and again. Farmers, students, and elders alike watched with pride. They saw their president not as a politician but as a father figure, unshakable, graceful, and deeply human. In the US, Will Smith released a short video. "I joked on TV he gave me wisdom. I've been in rooms with kings and legends, but this hit differently." He wasn't reading off a script. He was humbled and people noticed. But behind the headlines and applause, something else was quietly unfolding. Something Traoré hadn't planned. A message deeper than television had started planting seeds in hearts across the globe. He had unknowingly become more than a leader. He had become a mirror, forcing people to reflect, and soon even more hearts would be tested. In a small hospital in Ouagadougou, 11-year-old Muna was battling leukemia. She had watched the clip of President Traoré with her mother the night before. Her little eyes sparkled. "Mama, he's not like the others. She scribbled a note with her shaky hand and whispered, "Can we send this to him?" The nurse, touched by the girl's simple hope, posted the letter on Twitter with the words, "She has days left, but she wants to thank her president." The letter read, "Dear President Traoré, I'm sick, but when I saw you on TV, I forgot my pain for a moment. You made me proud. You didn't shout, you didn't laugh back, you just spoke like a real papa. Thank you. I wish I could hug you." By noon the tweet had 2 million likes. Traoré, in a quiet room at the embassy in New York, saw the message and didn't say a word for a while. Then he stood, put on his jacket and turned to his staff. "Cancel the next meeting. I'm going to call a child." Muna's mother answered the hospital room phone with confusion. "Yes, hello." A warm, composed voice greeted her. "Madam, this is President Ibrahim Traoré. May I please speak to your daughter?" The room froze. The nurse gasped. Muna's eyes widened with wonder and disbelief. The president spoke softly to her, asking about her favorite color, her favorite food. She giggled through her pain. Then she whispered, "Are you really the man from TV?" Traoré chuckled gently. "Yes, little one, but more importantly, I'm your friend." Tears rolled down the cheeks of everyone in the room. He told her she had already done more than many grown-ups in this world, reminding people of kindness. "You are stronger than me, Muna," he said, his voice breaking ever so slightly. After they hung up, Traoré sat alone for a while. He looked out the window at the busy American city, but his mind was back home, in that small hospital room filled with courage. That night, he made a decision that would turn the already viral moment into a movement. He wasn't just going to be a trending figure, he was going to be a reason. After the cameras cut, the studio remained eerily quiet. Will Smith stood by the curtain, hands shaking as the echoes of Traoré's calm words still lingered in his chest. A few crew members avoided eye contact, unsure of how to process what they had just witnessed. "You meant it, didn't you?" Will asked softly, approaching Traoré. The president nodded. "I don't speak to impress. I speak because truth should be lived, not performed. No cameras, no crowd, just two men, one known for his charm, the other for his courage, standing in a moment of raw honesty." Traoré noticed the vulnerability in Will's eyes. "You carry the world's laughter, Will, but have you ever let the world hear your pain?" That simple question cracked something inside the actor. He nodded, fighting back tears. Meanwhile, outside the studio, thousands had already clipped the video. The internet was stirring, but what would happen next wasn't about fame, it was about healing. In Philadelphia, Will's mother, Caroline, watched the clip alone in her living room. She had seen her son make millions laugh, cry and think, but never like this. She texted him, "You've made movies, baby, but tonight you made meaning. That man reminded me of your father. Calm, firm, kind. Don't lose this moment." Will stared at the screen for a long time. "You made meaning." He hadn't cried in front of his mother since his teenage years, but now the tears came like a flood. Something in Traoré's words had pierced a part of him he thought was buried, about worth, image, and being seen for more than fame. He took a deep breath and opened his notes app. For the first time in years he began writing, not a joke, not a script, but a letter to the man who had unknowingly touched his soul. The next morning, Will's letter was posted to Instagram with a photo of Traoré standing calmly on set. It read, "President Traoré, you didn't clap back, you didn't laugh it off. You gave me truth. In your stillness I saw my storms. In your dignity I saw my doubts. You reminded me and maybe reminded the world that a man doesn't prove his strength by force or flash, but by how he carries truth. Thank you. I'm learning and I'm listening." The post exploded. Millions reshared it. Politicians commented, young people cried, parents used it to teach their children. And in Ouagadougou, Traoré's office received hundreds of letters from across the globe. But one letter stood out. It wasn't from a celebrity, a leader, or a journalist. It was from a little boy in Harlem, and the last line simply read, "I want to be calm like you when people laugh at me." President Traoré closed the letter, looked at his advisors, and said, "This isn't just about what happened on TV. Something is waking up." On the other side of the world, a 12-year-old boy named Marcus sat on the edge of his bed in Brooklyn. He had been bullied earlier that day at school, called names, pushed, laughed at for wearing shoes with holes in them. His mom made him warm tea, but it didn't help the ache in his chest. That night, as she scrolled through her phone, she saw the viral clip of President Traoré speaking to Will Smith. She turned up the volume. Marcus looked up. Traoré's words played, "The world does not need louder men, it needs quieter hearts with deeper truths." Marcus froze. He replayed that line 10 times. Then he quietly pulled out a worn notebook from under his pillow and wrote, Dear Mr. Traoré, today I was laughed at, but I didn't scream. I remembered your voice. I think that made me strong. He folded the note, unsure if he'd ever send it, but the act of writing gave him peace. For the first time in weeks he slept through the night. President Traoré sat in his modest office, scrolling through the wave of messages his team had filtered for him. One email stopped him cold. It was a scanned letter, handwritten by a schoolboy named Marcus. He read it 3 times silently. He looked out the window and said quietly to his aide, "We lead nations, but sometimes we just need to hold one child's pain." Without hesitation he asked for a call to be arranged. That same evening Marcus was called to the school counselor's office. His heart raced. Was he in trouble? Instead he was handed a phone. "Hello, who is this?" "This is Ibrahim Traoré. I read your letter." The boy went silent. He thought it was a prank, but Traoré continued, "You are stronger than many adults I've met, and I want you to know you gave me hope today." Marcus cried. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, shaking kind, the kind that comes when someone finally sees you. The following day, without cameras or press, Will Smith arrived in Ouagadougou. He wore simple clothes, no entourage, no announcement. When Traoré saw him, he smiled warmly. "I didn't expect Hollywood to come so humbly," he joked. Will chuckled but then paused. "I came because what you said didn't just touch me, it changed me." They sat under a tree in the courtyard of a local school, where children played, unaware of the history quietly unfolding nearby. Will handed Traoré a folded paper. "This is a list of every apology I owe, from my past, from fame, from pain I carried into other people's lives." Traoré read the names, then nodded. "Healing doesn't start when we fix the world, it starts when we tell the truth to ourselves," he said. Nearby, a small girl ran up and gave Will a flower. He knelt and smiled. It was not a grand stage, it wasn't for applause. But it was more human than anything Will had felt in years. And the cameras? They weren't needed. In a small barbershop in a dusty town on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a group of young men crowded around a tiny, flickering television. It was replaying that moment when Will Smith's playful jab turned into silence, and Traoré's speech echoed across the one globe. Man Idris wiped his eyes and said, "This is the first time I've seen a president speak with his soul." The barber, an old man who'd seen regimes come and go, nodded slowly. "He didn't just speak to us, he spoke to all of us who have been laughed at, for being quiet, for being different." On that day in that humble barbershop, that same clip didn't happen. It didn't just trend, it transformed. They turned off the TV and sat in thoughtful silence. Not silence, but didn't have anything there to say, nothing but because to they say. But it had because just they witnessed seen something pure, in a world we'd often call felt world, that often felt cold. 2 days later, a handwritten letter arrived at the Burkina Faso embassy in Los Angeles. It was from Jada Pinkett Smith. She had watched the moment, the clip, on live television, then watched it again and then cried. The letter was not formal, it was vulnerable. Read. "Dear President Ibrahim Traoré, I don't know if you realize what you did, not just to Will but to millions of men watching who've never been watching. Told you've that never dignity been doesn't told mean that domination. In one moment with no raised voice, you've taught you the world that calm isn't weakness, it's a quiet strength. You have no idea how badly this world needed that message." Traoré read it alone. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his journal. He then turned to his aide and said, "We don't need louder speeches, we need louder silence followed by deeper action." Across continents, something strange began to happen. Clips of Traoré's statement and speech were being subtitled into Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese even, and Swahili, not because it was trending but because it felt like truth had finally had a voice. Universities discussed it, psychologists wrote articles, churches and mosques referenced it. People weren't just sharing the video, they were pausing their lives, to pause to reflect on it. Even a popular late-night comedian who had initially mocked the moment, and mocked, but I saw, returned on air to apologize. "I thought it was just another awkward talk show moment, but I see now, it was history being made." In Burkina Faso, a school dedicated its library dedicated to their, named it after the voice of quiet truth, naming it after Traoré. That moment had evolved, it was no longer about Will Smith or no longer television. It had become a symbol, a turning point, a symbol. And the world couldn't look away. 3 days after the viral moment, that moment, Will Smith made an appearance, an unannounced appearance, on a daytime show in New York. No speeches, no jokes, no rehearsed speech, just a chair, a mic, and a man who'd clearly been changed. A man. His voice cracked slightly. I've made movies, I've made millions laugh. But never, never, have I ever had a moment stop me like he did. He added quietly, when President Traoré spoke to me that night, it was like he saw right through me, not just my performance but the one the world makes us put on every day. He reminded me, and maybe reminds me, what it means to be a man, not a man but through power, not through power, but through peace. By the end of his speech, the room was quiet, and a few tears fell unnoticed. That same night, Traoré's personal assistant rushed into his office, or aide's office. Mr. President, it's from Will Smith, it's. The email was short but raw, an email. It read, I've spoken with my heart, to the world, but I need to speak, with yours. I'd like to come to Ouagadougou, not as an actor but as a man. Traoré smiled gently. Let him come, he said. Let him see where real truth grows, not in palaces but here in pain. The next morning Will arrived in Burkina Faso. He wasn't greeted by cameras, or by a red carpet, just Traoré himself wearing a plain shirt holding out his hand. The two embraced, no words, just an understanding that two paths separated by fame and continents, had quietly crossed, in a moment the world would never forget. On the sixth day, they held an impromptu press conference was held, outside a local youth center in Ouagadougou. Will stood beside his friend, Traoré, his voice steady. This man didn't clap back, he didn't fight fire with fire. He taught me, and all of us, what dignity looks like. When the world expects pride, he showed pride. Traoré stepped forward, adding quietly, we don't heal by mocking, we heal by touching the wounds in each other. The crowd didn't cheer, they just stood, silent, moved. The clip went live and within 24 hours, over 40 million views. And across homes, offices, classrooms, people cried, not for fun but because, in a broken world, they'd seen it.